Hi, in our previous video we concluded our smart contract in the lib.rs file. Now we are going to create our Candid file so that our frontend can know what's happening on the backend. For that I'm going to open this Candid file, and we are not going to use this one. And in this file, first we are going to create our types. We used a couple of structs and enumerations. We are going to define them here so that we can say we are going to use this type as a parameter for our function, and for the return values too, we are going to use the types that we are going to implement right now to our Candid file. Now let's start with our proposal. I'm going to say type proposal equals, and here we are going to say record. For the struct we will say record, and for the enums we are going to say variant. And in our proposal, as you remember, we have description, which is string in our Rust, but in the Candid file we call it text. Next we have approve, which is U32 again in Rust, but here it's not 32. We have reject, which is the same. Pass, and we also have isActive, which is boolean, same here. We have voted vector, and for the vectors we are saying vec keyword and then what type of vector it is, and it's a principal vector. And finally we have the owner, which is also a principal. So that's our proposal struct that's defined in the Candid file. Let's do the same for our CreateProposal. And again, we use Candid type in our Rust code, as you can see here. In our structs, we set this Candid type, which allows us to define these types in the Candid file. We were able to do this because we used Candid type with our struct. Now let's say CreateProposal, and I'm going to say record, and inside this we have two fields, description, which is going to be text, and then we have isActive, which is going to be a boolean. Now let's create another type, and this time we are going to create result type, which we have in Rust but we don't have in Candid. And we are going to say result equals, again we set for the enumerations we are using variant, and we are going to have two fields. First we are going to have OK, and then we are going to have the error, and the type of the error will be VoteError. We have not implemented it yet, but we are going to implement it just after this one. Now, as promised, let's implement VoteError. It's going to be a variant, and we will have already voted. Proposal is not active. No such proposal. And finally, we have access rejected. We defined this result and we said we have OK and error variance, and for the error the type is VoteError, which we didn't define back then, but now after defining VoteError you can see that this error is going to be one of these ones. Now let's create our final type, which is the choice. For the choice we have three variants. These are approve, reject, and pass. Now that we have the necessary types, we can create our function signatures. For the functions we are going to say service, and inside the service I'm going to start with get proposal. Our get proposal accepts U64. Our functions in general accept U64, which we use as the key in our functions, so we are going to see not 64 as a parameter a lot while defining our function signatures. I'm going to say not 64 here, and as a return type, what we have is an option, and here we can actually use option with opt keyword. I'm going to say proposal, and it's going to be a query function. We talked about this in the previous lessons, but again we only say query if it's a query function, and if it's an update function we don't have to indicate that's an update function. Now let's create the next one. I'm going to say get proposal count. It's not going to accept any parameters, and we are going to return not 64. query. Now these were our query functions. Now we are going to create our update functions. Let's start with the CreateProposal. We have two parameters here, not64 and CreateProposal. This CreateProposal is defined up here. And we are going to return option proposal, and for that we are going to say opt proposal. We didn't say update since we don't have to if it's not query. Now let's do the edit proposal. We are going to accept not64 and CreateProposal. We are going to return a result here. Next we have end proposal. For parameters we just have not64 and we are returning a result. And finally we have our vote, and our parameters are not64 and choice. We are also returning a result here. Now we created our Candid file. As you can see, it's actually not that hard, but we just need to know a couple of things. First of all, don't forget that we are working with not as a natural number instead of integer types. So if you have u32, that means you have not32. Instead of string, we have text, and we are defining our structs and enumerations using the keyword type. And if it's a struct, then it's a record. And if it's an enumeration, then we call it a variant. And after we have the necessary types implemented, we can create our functions. We had to implement these types before defining signatures for our functions, because if we haven't defined them, we couldn't use these kind of structures since they are not implemented. And in many situations, we are using custom types like we did with the proposal. So that's all for this video. Now that we have everything in place, in our next video, we are going to test our contract. So thank you very much for this one, and I will see you on the next video.